Could a child be saved with a heart transplant? Or a miracle will happen? It all begins years ago when, due to a traffic accident, Sarah's life changes radically. Upon receiving the news that one of the vehicles involved in the accident belongs to her husband, she immediately goes to the place with her baby to get the worst surprise, since with her husband was his lover, who had already lost her life. She is very shocked, not knowing what to do or what to say and wondering who this mysterious woman who was with him is. She leaves indignantly without paying the slightest attention to Tony, since she thought that she had a beautiful marriage since that day she got married, when she swore to always be together under all circumstances. Sarah had everything in her life: her new house, a loving man who loved her, who made her very happy. Shortly after they were married, the arrival of her first baby drove Tony crazy with love, where her life was filled with new dreams and experiences. That is why Sarah, disappointed, takes off her wedding ring and cannot understand how all that happened, and even more so later, when she finds out that it was her own sister who was with him on the day of the fatal accident. Now Sarah, devastated and disappointed, must fight for her son, Tito, who is the only one who gives her enough strength to move forward. Time passes and Tito is no longer a baby. On her birthday, Sarah takes the opportunity to celebrate with him, like every year. And although Tito is a dreamy and intelligent child enough to create his own book, Sarah always lives depressed and worried, since her son suffers from a heart disease, which is why she has been tempted on several occasions to communicate with her ex-husband to tell him about her son. But pride and resentment makes her retract it without thinking that this contact would be good for Tito. Even though Sarah feels alone, she really isn't, since her neighbors are watching out for her, and even though Anna doesn't want to know anything about God, they always remind them that God is where she can find hope, especially at the moment when sadness invades her the most. Although Tito, unlike Sarah, has paid attention to what his neighbor and friend Pedro teaches them about God. On the other hand, Tony has not been able to overcome his trauma either. The memory of that accident relives him at night in his nightmares, which are repeated very frequently. He also suffers for Sarah, for having lost her and for not being able to be next to her son. That is why his remorse does not let him live, because he knows that he has not been a good father, nor a good husband. That is why Martín, his co-worker, has become his best friend, and although Tony has lost all faith in God, Martín, apart from praying for him, explains to him that everything he is experiencing is a consequence of his actions and advises that you find your son and tell him how much you love him. The same thing happens with Sarah, who has also lost faith in God, and when she sees the perfect family that Anna has, she tells her that God does not love her the same way he loves them. But God also really has a purpose with Sarah, because it is no coincidence that both Anna and Martin agree to talk about the same thing to Sarah and Tony. Days later, Tony meditates on the advice of his friend and travels to where his son is. Sarah, upon seeing him, is perplexed and without saying a word. While his son, surprised, wonders who that man is. Although Tito already imagines that he is his father, he does not receive it in a kind way since he feels a lot of resentment for leaving him abandoned for more than 5 years. At lunchtime, Tito apologizes to his father for the treatment he gave him when he saw him, and prays as he always wanted to do, united as a family, as his friend Pedro's family does every day. From that moment, Tito and his father recover something of their relationship, so his father observes all the drawings of the wishes that Tito has been treasured throughout his life. Then the boy tells him that he has the oldest book he knows, the Bible, where there are surprising stories, like that of a boy who defeated a giant, and that of a man who fought against a lion and defeated it. Then Sarah and Tony begin to argue about Tito, since his father is an atheist and does not like his son to read the Bible, nor that he gets excited about those things of faith. And without even suspecting what Tito will have to go through later, they reproach each other for the mistakes that each of them made. At that moment, Tony gets even angrier when she tells him about her son's illness, and he immediately leaves so furious that he doesn't let Sarah give him the details of the illness. As the days go by, the situation between them remains the same, and between some of Tony's comings and goings, he reads the book in which Tito wrote his stories. On the other hand, Tito feels deep pain for all the years of his father's absence, so his friend Pedro repeats a phrase that his mother usually says, that all things work together for the good of those who love God. For Tony and Sarah, the separation has been very difficult, but now they only care about their son. That is why Sarah invites Tony to go to Tito's office for the first time, so that he can also get involved in his care. In response to her act of kindness, he thanks her for calling him, and confesses that from now on he will change and be a real father to Tito. From that day on, Tony fulfills his promise by sharing breakfast with his son and meeting with his neighbors, who tells them a verse from the Bible, but despite this, Tony tries to hide in the bathroom just so as not to hear the prayer. Days later, Tony invites Sarah and her son to go for a ride, and gives Tito the surprise trip that he had dreamed of so much, an unforgettable balloon ride. There Tito makes a comparison between balloons and people, explaining that both need hot air to live, just as being born requires the breath of God, and that is our air to reach heaven. Tito feels loved and protected by their parents, who like them enjoy the walk, and are so happy to give love and trust to his little son. When they arrive from the walk, they attend the invitation given by their friends Enrique and Anna, except Tony, who did not want to attend and stays at home. Where his curiosity to know what the Book of Corinth is about is so great that he begins to search for information on the internet to find out what it is about. And once he reads it, he realizes that he must seek God in order to have a new life. So he quickly shows up at the prayer meeting, and there he is introduced to the church group called Small Group. While Sarah follows the example of Anna's faith and wants to know more about the subject.
Mama!
At that moment, a desperate cry from Pedro calling for his mother makes them go to see what is happening, and they find Tito lying on the ground unable to breathe and burning with fever. He is immediately rushed to the hospital. While Tito whispers under his breath to take him home, the doctors discover that he has a serious clinical condition due to a cold. Tito apologizes to his father for not taking care of himself, since he is worried about not being able to attend the cantata that will be performed very soon, so the boy, without knowing the seriousness of his illness, dedicates himself to recover quickly. Now faced with a diagnosis of myocarditis, the only alternative that exists is a heart transplant. That is devastating news for Sarah, who hides from Tony the seriousness of her son's condition. Later, Anna offers to take care of Tito at night, so that Sarah can get some rest. Then on the way home, Tony apologizes to Sarah, acknowledging his mistakes, although she does not want to forgive his betrayal and even less forgives him for the fact that her sister has lost her life because of him. That makes him even more ashamed of the damage he caused them. He also admits that he has never been the same man since that time, and implores her to at least let him be a good father. Then he asks her what the doctor told her. Without saying words, she bursts into tears, which leaves Tony even more disturbed. Then she turns around and tells him that it's not because of Tito, and in the end she reveals that she is also sick and in worse condition. That is a difficult moment for both of them, since the child needs them, so out of love for her son and with a big hug, Sarah forgives him and tells him that she has been at peace with God since she felt his breath. Days later, Sarah is happy to receive her rebirth for having accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior, and she is baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Meanwhile, father and son watch everything via video call from the hospital. Tony, very excited, tells Tito how much he admires his mother, and immediately the nurse comes to look for Tito to surprise him that the church choir has prepared a very special song for him, called Love of Neighbor, in solidarity with him since he could not participate in the sonata. While the choir sings that beautiful song, something unexpected happens. The nurse quickly takes Tito away, informing them that they have found a heart donor for Tito. Seconds later, the doctors give everything to make the operation successful, but suddenly there is a lot of blood and they cannot see what they are doing. That's why the doctors fight tirelessly to stop it. Meanwhile, Tony and Sarah are anxious in the hallway waiting for a response from their son, but at that precise moment when Tito gets worse, his father begins to feel more distressed than normal, which is why he calls his work friend and they begin to pray together with great faith for his son. This makes Tito immediately begin to improve. However, everyone is waiting to see whether or not Tito could overcome the transplant. At that moment the doctor comes out, and everyone is happy for the successful operation. Days later, now out of danger, Tito tells his mother that he feels as if he had been born again, so Tony confesses that there are two reborns, because Tony was also reborn, when he was praying on his knees for his son in the corridor of that hospital. Since Jesus gave his life for him to give him a new life, a new heart. And from then on he realized that Enrique was right when he said that faith is the great secret to rebirth. On the other hand, Sarah also thanks Anna for insisting on helping her even when she believed that she did not need anyone, and thus being able to commemorate the miracle of Tito's life. And very moved, she turns to Tony to thank him for overcoming himself and being a better father. The hug of gratitude that she gives to the love of her life for having inspired her, and for giving her the strength to believe that hope can transform lives, could not be missed. 2 months later, Sarah's pancreatic cancer is in its final stages, and she never tires of telling Tito that she loves him. Life places Tito in a new test of strength, since before he missed his father and now he is going to miss his mother. But Sarah tells him that when he misses her, he should think of God, that he misses us too, and soon he will come looking for us so that we can all be united. When Sarah dies, Tony's life and that of his son's life are destroyed, and Tito, crying, draws again in his notebook. Time passes and Tito finds himself visiting Sarah's grave with his daughter, who asks him if he will see his mother again. He answers that soon we will all meet again and live together forever. She asks him if he still dreams. He responds quickly, of course, and clarifies that there is something that was a dream hope for him and his grandmother, which is now going to be for her too, and shows her the drawing of the balloon. Immediately she understands the meaning that God saves them and is going to take them home. This is the summary of a Christian film based on real events called Renewing the Faith. Click here and don't miss the next story.